So you study natural sciences at Cambridge, which to the outsider and certainly to an insider is one of the most challenging courses at the university and potentially at Oxbridge. Can you walk me through a week in the life of a natural sciences student at Cambridge?
Yeah. It definitely is challenging. So thank you for dropping that in there. A lot of people don't seem to think that. But my week is typically I have 9 a.m. lectures almost every day, and Monday to Saturday in first year, which is a lot of people hate, but it's okay. You get used to it. I have 2, maybe 3 hours of lectures a day, and then three lots of what we call supervisions, which I'm sure everybody from Oxbridge has been over the moon talking to you about, and all the work that comes along with them. But that's basically my week. And then I'll have practicals depending on what type of subjects you pick. Some of them don't, some of them do. And they're quite good fun, but obviously that's subject to subject as well.
Mhm. And for a student that might be concerned about something like work-life balance, and my estimation is that people applying to Oxbridge probably won't be intimidated by big workloads, but how long would you say you work in a week?
In a week is a very good question. I don't think I could give you an answer straight away, but I would say in a day, what I'd like to do is I'd like to keep myself to sort of like a 9 to 5, as if I was working a job. So I found what works for me is I go to my lectures, and then after my lectures, I'll spend a lot of time in coffee shops or with my mates in the town centre, just trying to work through bits and problems that we haven't done so far. And then come back home, maybe take a few hours off, cook dinner, eat dinner, see if I've got some spare time in the evening, fill it with work, go see friends, go out, do whatever really. And I try to keep my weekends as free as possible because I love being able to just not think about work on those weekends. It's a nice break, and try and do some sports as well.
Amazing. I mean, you strike me as the type of person that is able to balance work and life quite well. But as you know, there are some people at the university that perhaps struggle with that. I was certainly someone that struggled with a work-life balance. I was very much doubling down all the time, if not too much, on work. And at some point, I realized that the juice isn't necessarily worth the squeeze in terms of the outcome that you get. You might be marginally 5% better than someone else, but at what cost does that come? So I guess that's something I learned from my experience. Now, I just wanted to dive a little bit deeper into a day in the life. A lot of people watching this will naturally be aspiring to study natural sciences or physics in particular. Could you perhaps allude to some of the topics that you're thinking about in first year and perhaps how that's stepped up from A level in some way?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I'd say in first year, a lot of the stuff is getting, especially in Michaelmas in first term, it's getting everybody up to the same speed. So getting everybody working on the same page, and you're able to talk to everybody in the same sort of language effectively. So your maths skills are like put to, I'd say, A level further maths within the first few weeks. And then your physics skills, they're just building on basic dynamic stuff that you've done before. And then going from that, you you build onto topics like rotational mechanics and special relativity, which are really, really nice. And they are like the first year topics, those are lovely. Then you move on to some more complicated ones like optics and waves, and you talk about a bit of quantum, but not very much. So it's still interesting stuff. And then in the last term, you do fields where it's magnetic fields, gravitational fields, and electric fields, and now they become like your bread and butter. Like you love them by the time you get into second year, or at least I do. And some people may not like the fact that I like it, but here we are.
How much of a step up was it from A level? I'm aware that you did further maths to AS level, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely correct.
How did you find stepping into an environment where I presume most people have done further maths at their A level entirely, and in which you're surrounded by a lot of maths geniuses and whizzes? How did you find that?
Yeah. Well, to begin with, it is very, very daunting. It really is. I can't stress that enough. And everybody is in those shoes. Like, not even, I did AS for the maths, like you said, and the skills in that weren't they weren't really compatible or comparable to the ones that people have done in A level further maths. And you could tell that they had a step up at the start, but it's fine because the way in which the course is built is that even if you do, by the end of the third or fourth week, everybody's on new stuff. So you're all in the same boat. And as well, they run two separate maths courses, Maths A and Maths B, where one's a tiny bit more accelerated. There isn't really that big of a difference. But if you do one of them, you can always switch. So if you feel like it's going a bit too quick, I'd always recommend starting on the faster one, which was B in my year. This is for first year. Um, and if it's going a bit too quick, you can always switch to Maths A. It's still mostly the same stuff. It's just a bit less accelerated. But the way in which I got over it a lot was mainly by speaking to people. If you get yourself out there and you speak to more and more people on the course, you realize everyone's in the same boat, and they really, really are.
Yeah, I find it really interesting how you don't necessarily need further maths to study natural sciences, and especially a physics degree, which strikes me as quite interesting because I'd imagine there might be a lot of year 11 students who are watching this right now and perhaps are thinking about what to study at A level. Would you say it's essential to have studied further maths at A level?
No, I wouldn't say it's essential at all. I'd say you'd be more than fine studying just maths and not doing further maths. It would be helpful if you enjoy maths, I'd say is the most important thing. If you're enjoying maths and you're enjoying physics and you want a bit more maths, it's a nice sort of getting into it kind of step, but you'll be absolutely fine if you just did maths. And I think at the end of the day, natural sciences as a degree is built for pick what you enjoy. So when you're in there, please do pick what you enjoy, because if you don't, it will show for you, especially in that first term. You'll realize, why am I doing these options? And you can always switch them.
Yeah, I think the last thing you want to be doing is pigeonholing yourself into something that you really don't want to do. And I think the Cambridge degree, and this is true for Oxford as well, is very flexible in that they give you a lot of breadth in the first year and allow you to experiment which field within your discipline is most interesting. And I remember vividly in first year, so I studied geography, and one of the optional modules to take was dendrochronology, which is the study of tree rings, which is fascinating in its own right, but it didn't strike me as what I wanted to spend 3 years learning. So, as you said, it's very important to get that right from the get go because otherwise you'll be suffering for a full 3 years. Now, I wanted to move on a little bit to your motivation for studying natural sciences because a lot of the people watching this might be in the process of putting together their new UCAS questions, and one of the biggest components of that is why they want to study their subject. And the one thing that I truly believe in that helps craft a great response and also helps you at interview is understanding precisely your motivation, the why surrounding your application, because that can really act as the thread through which all the different bits of your subject hang on. And so, if you cast your mind back to when you were 17, what was your motivation for studying natural sciences, and has that changed?
I think that's a great way of phrasing it because it really does depend on your motivation for everything. Um, I'd say when I was at that tipping point, I only applied to Cambridge about a week or two before the deadline. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I think that shows in the fact I applied to natural sciences because it's the indecisive degree where you get to pick later. But when I was at that stage, I was studying maths, chemistry, and physics at A level, and I was sat there and I was like, I don't know what I want to do here. I don't know what I want to go and study. I don't know what fits with me. And so I thought natural science is best pick. I'll pick the stuff later and then I'll see what I enjoy. And as well, this is going to sound a bit strange to most people, but a big changing point for me was I went to watch the film Oppenheimer because that came out in the summer before I went to uni. And I was like, oh, I want to go study physics now. So, that I'll take that as my motivation. That and the fact that I look at a lot of things and I just want to pick them apart. I want to problem solve on almost a daily basis, if you get me. So I'd say that's more where my motivation lies. It's not me going, I want to be great at physics, because it really isn't. I just want to I just want to understand everything a bit more.
Yeah, I think it's very unrealistic if a student at the age of 17 knows precisely why they want to study
Yeah.
their subject.
Yeah,
they have a fascination for quantum entanglement and whatever. I don't know. I'm sure there are some geniuses out there that perhaps do have a very specific motivation, but in most cases, it just comes down to, as you said, you enjoy problem solving, you have a mathematically inclined brain, you like science. And so I think one of the challenges that students might encounter is trying to create a really fascinating narrative in their UCAS questions when actually it can often come down to something as simple as I'm hardworking, I enjoy science, and I want to study at a uni. And to be honest, I don't think the university professors who are reading your UCAS questions will perhaps care too much if you don't have a fully fledged story because they recognize you're only 17 and 18. So it's, as I said, pretty unrealistic to have that fully fledged story.
Yeah.
I wanted to pick up on something you said. So you said you watched Oppenheimer and it made you apply to Cambridge, which is a very fair decision. I mean, you could argue that me watching David Attenborough documentaries meant that I applied for geography. Um, to what extent would you say that Oppenheimer, the kind of grand physics experiments, the awe, the life-changing nature of physics maps onto your actual university experience? Have there been moments where you think, wow, physics is amazing? Or is it mundane in some sense? Like, to what extent is it fun?
Yeah. I think the I'm trying to think of a good analogy. I think like on a sliding scale, it goes to both sides. And like there have been times where I'm sat there like, why am I doing these problem sheets? I'm gonna spend 3 hours of my life on these, and what point is this? And then there is other bits where after you've cracked one of them, you're like, oh, that's actually really cool. But I feel like I'm very much taking every year as it comes, especially at this degree. I'm like, I don't have the passion that some people do to go on and do research and PhDs because that's not where my intents lie. But I'm enjoying sitting there and relishing in how my mindset changes as the year goes on. Like I'll sit there at the first start of a course and the first few weeks, it's like, this is so boring. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I hate this. And then it'll get to the end, and I'm like, oh, I get to go home. And then I'll do a bit of revision. I'll be like, that was actually fine. It's just when you're in that environment and you're trying to work hard every day, a lot of the time it does just beat you down. And I feel like taking a break, doing any kind of sports, any kind of hobbies you enjoy, reading, whatever, just to get away from it is such a great idea.
Yeah, I think it's really very common to be thrown completely into chaos in the first few terms of Cambridge. The learning curve
Yeah,
is very steep, and even for myself, having studied geography, which ostensibly is a pretty easy subject, I mean, people say you just colour in all day, which isn't far from the truth. But even in that subject, I found that, okay, wow, some of this reading is very challenging, and I don't think I'll be
oh
able to get
yeah,
through this. But somehow, it's kind of like there's that scene in Harry Potter. I don't know if you remember in the very first film where Dumbledore is like lighting up the streets with lights, and he keeps
yeah,
walking along, and he just keeps lighting them up, and he looks behind him, and he realizes how far he's come because the whole street is now illuminated. And I think the journey at Cambridge is quite similar. It's very much a process of following the rules, doing the work, putting in the repetitions, and eventually you'll realize how far you've come. And I certainly had that experience at the end of first year. I was like, wow, actually, I'm better than this than I thought I was. Because at the beginning, I thought I was absolutely in for it and just had no chance of doing anything well.
I mean,
So,
I was the exact same. I love that analogy. I think I'll be stealing that one. I know that in Michaelmas in first year, I was like, I don't know how to work. I was staying up till like early hours of the morning with my friends trying to get problem sheets done, and it was just not working for us because then we were missing lectures in the morning, and so on and so on. And then we were like, right, enough is enough. And I feel like the first year, or especially the first term at uni, is figuring out what works for you. And I feel like that enough stress isn't put on that, and yeah, enough focus isn't put on that, especially at Cambridge. It's you're just expected to know and expected to work straight away, but you really don't because you're dropped in an environment which is completely different and a completely different way of learning than you might be used to at school, and you're there like you're being dropped in an ocean, and you're just trying to find how to swim, if you
yeah,
get me. But and I feel like everyone's in the same boat again. You And I feel like working with people. especially for me, working with my mates on the same course has been so useful. And I can't recommend that enough to everyone.
Yeah, and I think really to build on this analogy further of being dropped in the ocean, I think at some point you just have to remember to stay in your lane, to swim in your lane, because some people at
Yeah.
Cambridge, you'll get there and they will be Michael Phelps, professional level swimmers, and you'll be thinking, how is this possibly human to work at that pace, to understand that quickly? But eventually, you do tend to catch up to people. You might not be 1 meter behind them like a professional Olympic athlete, but you'll be able to get to the same destination as they will if you just keep pushing yourself and challenging yourself. So, yeah, you get dropped in the ocean, but you definitely learn how to swim after some time. Now, I just wanted to move on to the application process itself for natural sciences. Can you walk me through your interview experience?
So of course I can. So my interview experience, I am quite I loved my interviews in a really strange way. I really did like my interviews, and I feel like that's how you know that this is sort of for you. So I was in there and I was so nervous. I had a shirt on because I thought I've got to make a good impression. And I sat there and I get dropped into my physics style interview because obviously I applied for physical natural sciences and they did a sort of physicsy based one and a sort of mathsy based one. And I was in my physicsy one and go through all the introductory process, like this is who you are, isn't it? Like, yeah, yeah, that I am Tom Hewins. And then they go, so the first question, how would you find the mass of the atmosphere? And I sat there and I remember going, what? What? That's such an outlandish question. But I remember just coming up with like a few different ways off the top of my head, knowing full well that they were all wrong. And the guy on the other side of the screen says, but what do you think about this? And I was like, yeah. And then we just started working through the process practically together. And it's just they will drop on you, I think, in natural sciences interviews. They'll drop on you a big question and they don't expect you to get the answer straight away. If you get the answer straight away, that's no fun for the interviewer at that point. But it's also not showing who you are. They're after you to see that big question, look at it, try and break it down in a way and say, where can I relate this to stuff that I've been through before? What have I learnt about in school? What have I read about before? And what can I talk to them about? I feel like that to me is why I enjoyed my interviews because it was basically me trying to solve a problem and then giving me hints along the way. And I think it's great, to be honest. I think they have really cracked how to do it properly, especially for natural sciences.
Yeah, I think preparing for STEM interviews is really challenging in a way because, at least from the surface, it feels like a lot of your success will depend on some level of intellectual agility on the day. Because you can learn all the facts you want in science, but ultimately, what matters is your ability to apply concepts to a new problem. So, would you mind sharing how you prepared for the interview and what advice would you give to someone that is about to prepare for a natural sciences interview?
Definitely. How I prepared for it is I know that there was going around, I can't remember what the name of the organization is, but they're the people who run the maths challenges in the UK. And they
UKMT.
were doing, yeah, and they were doing maths mock interviews. And I was like, oh, I need to get on one of them. And so I got on one of them, and then I was speaking to the lady who was doing that, and she was really helpful. That was one of the ways I prepared for it. Another one was looking at mainly just like your common physics questions that you'll see online in like forums, like the really grand ones, like, oh, how do you know the extent of the universe or stuff like that? And just looking at that and thinking how I would go about answering it, not necessarily writing a paragraph or writing like an A4 page long, but just thinking, because like you said, it's to do with a bit of intellectual agility on the day. And if you're trying to stress yourself out memorizing all of these facts and memorizing all of your course, you're not going to have that. It's all about like being calm in yourself and you know that you're going to be able to do okay. Because at the end of the day, the interviewers on the other side of the screen are just people as well. They're only there to talk to you and figure out if this is the right place for you and if this is where you want to be.
Yeah, and I think again, it's very difficult with STEM interviews because you never know what's going to come your way. But I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if you can understand your A-level curriculum inside out, back to front, and you understand things from first principles, then it's much more likely that you'll be able to encounter and solve a new problem when you're presented with it at interview. Yeah.
Definitely. 100%. They're not going to test you on stuff that's outside what you should know. They're never going to do that because they're not there to catch you out.
Yeah.
And I mean, as long as you will be doing what you already will be doing and preparing for revising for your A levels, you'll be absolutely fine.
And based on your experience, having met all of the peers who would have been through the interview process, what would you say separates them from perhaps someone else that didn't win a place? Would you say that there's a uniting characteristic between all natural sciences students?
I wouldn't say there was, to be perfectly honest. I don't think there's like, oh, there's a cut amongst the rest. I don't think that kind of thing exists. I think it's just like it's on a person to person basis, right? Because everybody's different, and they're in there and they're just testing to see if you would fit in, right? If this is the place for you, because it's not necessarily them going to reject you because they don't want you here. It's if you would do well here, and that's the whole interview process in a nutshell. Is if when you're dropped in at Cambridge, would you would you float? Would you be able to swim? Or would it drag you down? Because they don't want people to be in here and fail, because they don't want people to not have a good time in a way, if you understand me. Like everybody wants the best for other people. At least that's what I live by. And so yeah, I don't think there is anything that like separates most people. I think it's just just try your best.
Yeah, I think that's a very encouraging piece of advice to hear because I think a lot of people listening perhaps might have wanted you or were scared of you saying something like, "Yeah, everyone is really great at Boolean algebra" or some weird stuff. Like, obviously, obviously you've got to be competent in maths, physics, chemistry, whatever. But it's comforting to know that it doesn't really matter that you have a specific skill or not. What matters more
Yeah,
is your
yeah.
intellectual curiosity, it's your ability to work hard, and also your potential. Because I think an interview isn't a snapshot of your potential at a moment in time. It's also a snapshot of your potential in the future as well. So they're very much assessing, is this someone that A, has the correct skills right now to get in, and B, has the correct skills to improve and get better over time and become a Cambridge graduate. And I think that's what
Yeah,
they're looking for.
definitely.
So I wanted to change frequency a little bit and ask you an interesting question. Can you perhaps tell me the best and also the worst thing about Cambridge?
Oh, that's very good. The best I would say for me is just how many like-minded people you get to meet. And as well, this is going to be very biased, but the football system. I absolutely love playing football, and the collegiate football teams that they put on are amazing. Anyway, I won't talk anymore. Yeah, just how many people you get to meet and how many people are like you in a way, and you're out there and you're solving problems together, or you're just having fun on a football pitch or whatever. And then the worst thing I would say is the feeling you get when you feel like you haven't done enough work.
Hmm.
But that feeling is present amongst everybody, and if you tried your hardest to do something, then you have done your hardest, you've done your best. Like your supervisors, especially for me in natural sciences, they don't expect you to get 100%. They don't expect you to even answer all of the questions. They expect you to look at them, have given them a go, and be able to talk about them and say, this is where I went wrong. Can you help me, please? So that's the whole point. I feel like especially in Michaelmas, I misunderstood that a lot. I was like, I must answer everything. I must get 100% on everything. And that is really not the case.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting coming from a school environment where you are taught to believe that what you should be optimizing for is full marks on everything, especially the high performing A level students that would be listening. If it's either 90% above or you've basically failed pretty much. But actually, what matters more, especially in first year at Cambridge and Oxford, is an ability to really understand something from first principles and to give your best shot at solving the problem. Because in most cases, it's very unlikely that you'll be getting 100% on anything. I mean, I speak from my perspective in geography. The highest mark that anyone ever received in the geography department was something like 85%. So it's impossible to get 100% at Oxbridge. And so your baseline level of what a good grade is shifts from 100% to like 70. Because if you're getting above 60 to 70%, you're a genius at Cambridge, really. I remember I got a first in my final year and it was 71.3%, which if you compare that to A levels or GCSEs, that's not even an A star. So I guess it just goes to show that what you said is right. You have to, almost adjust your expectation a little bit and don't focus on maximizing, but satisficing. Getting the understanding in your brain and trying your hardest to do well for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, 100%.
no, interesting points. Best and worst thing. I just wanted to finish up on a bit of perhaps self help or philosophy for the students that might not believe in themselves for applying to Oxbridge. And you even said yourself you applied a couple of weeks before the deadline, which seems to strike me as quite interesting because that suggests that maybe you weren't even thinking about Oxbridge until the last minute. And correct me if I'm wrong.
No, no, exactly. I wasn't. I was stuck in year 13, or yeah, the start of year 13. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm just going to apply here because I think it'll be okay and I think I'll enjoy it. And it turns out I really do. Yeah, I think for everybody, see if this natural sciences course works for you. See if you look at it and you go, I'm an indecisive person. I'm not saying everybody who applies has to be indecisive, but I didn't know what I wanted. I saw this, I was like, it gives me options to pick and choose between some stuff that I'll enjoy. Like I chose earth sciences, chemistry, and physics in first year, and I loved earth sciences and physics and didn't really like chemistry, but that personal choice again. And I think see if it works for you, and if it does, even an inkling, apply. Definitely apply because I I love it, and I feel like everybody who gives it a go will love it as well. As much as I've said I hate the work, I come to love it in the end. And I think you've just got to put yourself out there and give it a go. And I know as much as applying to Oxford is a daunting experience because you'll hear like rejection after rejection from a lot of people, but it's worth the time and effort into thinking about if this is the right place for you. Definitely.
And is there anything that you believed at the age of 17 about Oxbridge that turned out not to be true?
Yeah. That you go there and it'd be a massive clicky culture and you'd have to do X amount of things to get into different societies and that everybody comes from the highest of highest private schools and whatever. And that's just not true. Like everybody who goes there is practically the same as you because of course they are. They've gone through the same application process, they've gone through the interviews, and whether you're coming from an international student, you're a UK state school, you're all treated the same in this entire course system. And it's the uni life as well. Like you've got so many different societies, university wide and college wide, that you can go and get into so many different sports. And I didn't realize applying here just how many things there are you can do, but you can do loads, and it's great.
Amazing. And just one final question to wrap up. Obviously, someone watching this might be at the very start of their journey for Oxbridge. If you were to go back and start from zero, what would you do differently? And ultimately, what would you recommend that they do right now to make themselves get ahead?
That's a very good question. I feel like something that we touched upon earlier, understanding why this is what you want to do. I'd do that a lot. I'd contemplate that yourself. I'd sit there and maybe like write some stuff out or look at different things in physics, for instance, specific to me, um, about why this is what you're wanting to go and study. Why would you commit 3 years of your life to coming to Cambridge to study this? And if you can answer that question, you're already ahead of most people in the application process.
Hmm. Yeah, establishing that why is really important. And I think that's the theme we started off at the beginning, and it's the theme we end today. So I will leave it there. So thank you very much for your time, and best of luck
Most
with
welcome.
second year.
Thank you very much, and best of luck to everybody who's watching.
Good luck, guys.